Welcome to the April 2025 Axe Decentralized Real Estate Update. In these update videos, I like to show you what we've been up to in the last few months and where we are going to be going in the next few months. As we can see, it's springtime at all the ranches, and by far, this is my favorite time of the year. I love spring because it's a time of renewal, rebirth. Quite literally, all of the livestock are having new babies, and it's so beautiful out there at Little G Ranch, at Creo, at Panoplia. The grasses are so green, the grasses are so lush. And I don't know about you, but for me, spring is the real new year. I don't celebrate January 1st as my new year because to me that's nighttime, that's death. For me, the real new year occurs now during springtime, and that's what I always see in the business. I always see expansion and growth during this time of the year, so it's just very, very exciting. So with that being the case, let's dive into it. Here's the main headlines. What's changed since our last update? We're going to cover a major update. We're switching away from the land stake model where people paying the $2,500 or the $5,000 for their land stake reservation. Instead, we're going to be going through 1% earnest money deposits with pre-approvals or proof of funds. And we'll talk about why we're making that change. I'm going to talk about why we are going deep to go wide as a company. I'll give you the state-by-state update with every one of the new Axe properties. We'll talk about some new breakthroughs we've made in grazing. It's a very simple switch that we've made, but this simple switch literally makes every single parcel 10 times more efficient. I'll explain exactly how in just a moment. We'll talk about a sod collection deal in Florida and using it as an example of the abundance that God wants for you. We'll talk about the first 6 months of running Wanted Raw Foods, as well as a new surprise, the first Wanted in-person location, Wanted Raw Foods Montgomery. And we'll finish up by talking about Axe Homes. We'll talk about what Axe Homes and construction even is. We'll talk about how to get pre-approved for your Axe home, as well as how to actually build your Axe home. We'll give you a completed timeline. So the theme that we have for the whole team as we move forward in Q2 is that we're going to be going deep to go wide. I've been reading through the Bible, and I just read through the book of Joshua. And on the one hand, a lot of people would compare a lot of what we do at Axe as like, hey, we're leading slaves out of Egypt. It's more and more kind of like being like almost like a modern day Moses type figure, everything that I have to do. However, that comparison to the Israelites, I don't like it too much because the Israelites, they messed up. They really never made it to the promised land. For me, I identify far more with Joshua. And when we talk about our goals for this year, we're talking about going from 2 properties, those Little G and Panoplia, to all the way to 12. And the mindset for that is the same mindset as Joshua as he went out and conquered. It's a mindset that says, hey, if we have God on our side, if we are in God's favor, then we will conquer. We'll be able to go out and we'll be able to dominate. And so even though we see there's many market fluctuations, there's general market uneasiness, we know that we still have God on our side and we can still go out and conquer. In this case, strategically, our focus is to raise trust. So if you're running your own business and you are going to be running into these issues with the tariffs and general market unease and uncertainty, the marketing that you push out there needs to raise trust because people's alarm bells are going off. And in the same way, you need to show how your business raises people's security. That's the biggest thing you can do with your marketing. So in our case, we'd rather spend the next 6 months perfecting each of our systems and coming out hot than exhausting ourselves trying to expand while trying to nail down those systems. So when I talk about systems, I'm talking about the Ranch Hand League. I'm talking about Wanted Raw Foods. I'm talking about Axe Homes and Construction. Remember, Joshua conquered lands one at a time rather than all at once. And that's what led to the steamrolling of all the Canaanites and all the Anakim that we see in the Bible. It's because every single time he conquered, what happened? He increased the level of faith among the Israelites, and he made it easier and easier and easier for his enemies to be scared of him and for him to come in and dominate and conquer those areas. So in the same way, that's exactly what we're doing with Active Centralized Real Estate. We want to continue conquering one at a time so that when we go to a new area, the enemy is shaking in his boots and that area is delivered to our hand. So one major change that we're making is we are switching away from the $2,500 and the $5,000 deposits that we had in the past. To be very clear, everybody who has a land stake, everything that was promised with the land stake is still there. So you still have first choice on land parcels. However, for people who have not bought a land stake, we are no longer going to be requiring you to buy a land stake. Instead, we will ask you to place a 1% deposit on whatever lands you're going to be choosing into escrow, and we are requiring pre-approval or proof of funds. The main reason for this is because it's smoother. What we saw previously was that people would be buying their $2,500 or their $5,000 land stake reservation, and they felt very entitled for it, even though they didn't have proof of funds, even though they didn't have approvals. And this meant that people were completely breaking our rules on being able to get under contract and close in 30 days or 45 days or less. And that, when I saw so many people taking advantage of that, that's when we said, hey, we have to switch it back. So moving to this model is just going back to what is standard in the real estate industry. So no matter whether it's land or a home or even apartment complex, it doesn't matter what it is, you're going to put a 1% earnest money deposit into escrow at the time of signing your contract. And the nice thing about this too is that it actually means that now that money gets added into whatever down payments you might have for whatever land you might have. So again, to be clear, if you are already a land stake holder, pay attention. You do not have to pay more. You do not have to do a 1% earnest money deposit. You've already done that. You've already done that. We are grandfathering you in. And that really becomes a benefit if you're getting, land that's large land or more expensive land, or you are getting a home build. That's going to save you a lot of money there. And again, you will continue to be first in line in order by when you place that land stake reservation when you are choosing a parcel. However, we will hold you to the standard of making sure that you have a pre-approval or you have proof of funds, just like the newbies. Okay, so you will go first before the newbies, but then you still must have pre-approval or proof of funds. The way that's going to work is, for example, in Tennessee, right? We will ask you what parcels do you want, and we will rank people based off of the parcels that they chose and their order in when they put in their land stake reservation. So you'll put your first choice, second choice, third choice, fourth choice, fifth choice. And if we see that your first, second, and third choice have already been chosen, then you will be given your fourth choice. That is how we're going to be running things for people who are land stakeholders. But even then, you must have pre-approval. You must have proof of funds. So now let's start talking about some properties. So we've got California here. This is Telios Ranch. This is some drone footage. Good news, the price has been agreed upon. This is, in real estate, that's a very big deal to have the price agreed upon. It's California. It's a litigious state. So every single line is very important. We are still finishing up the contractual agreement. It really comes down to the following. It's the languaging and the wording based upon the favors that the original seller for the California property is able to give us. For context, the gentleman has donated over 2,500 acres of land to San Diego County as part of conservation easements, as well as donated it to local universities. So he has a lot of pull with the local county government. And he has promised to use that weight and use that leverage to ensure that everything goes smoothly when it comes to the subdivision and when it comes to navigating all of the legal requirements that you find in California. Now, in the contract, it said that he would be the one ensuring that the subdivision goes through. Now, the subtle shift is that Axe officially has the responsibility, and that's what it should be, for us to make sure that the subdivision goes through, but he is contractually obligated to provide support in the sense of showing up to court with us, as well as signing documents with us. So that languaging on he will ensure the subdivision goes through to Axe ensures the subdivision will go through and he will support it. That is the final term that we are getting through. Tennessee. It's time to start lining up the saints for Tennessee. Again, what is a saint? A saint is a buyer who is going to close with us on the same day that we close on the Tennessee property. Saints are essential because they help us close on the property as well as set market appraisals so that everybody else from thereafter may be able to get their financing. And for everybody who is a saint, we give $25,000 off if you're a financed buyer and $50,000 off if you are a cash buyer. So we are having the next property visit. And after that property visit, it is time to line up the saints because people will be making their parcel selections. Now let's move on to Florida. In Florida, the first franchises are getting started, and we would like everybody to sign lease agreements for the usage of their land in order to maintain tax exemption status. Now, of course, no one's holding a gun to your head. If you are in Florida, you do not have to sign a lease agreement. However, if you do not have a franchise and you do not sign the lease agreement, it is upon you to maintain your own tax exemption status by showing some form of commercial agricultural activity. Now, I could have really put on the squeeze for everybody in Florida, and I could have been greedy and been like, well, you're basically SOL unless you sign up for a franchise and now we'll graze on your land to be able to get things up and running so that you can have this tax exemption status. There was discussions because business-wise, that would be the most wise thing that I could do. However, I care about you guys too much, so I didn't want to do that. Instead, we're offering this lease agreement for you guys so that you can sign it and still be able to maintain your tax exempt status. So please sign those agreements if you're in Florida. I want to give a quick shout out to the Maynards down there in Florida for having gotten up a 16-foot tall cross on their property and being so kind as to actually allow other property owners to go and pray at their parcel if they would like. I went and I saw it for myself, and guys, this is a truly moving piece to go out and see it. It's incredible, their story. It's incredible, their faith. They've been with us every step along the way. They've helped us out as angels. They have closed despite setbacks. And even in getting that cross up, there was potential setbacks, and yet they listened to the Lord and they listened to their hearts and they were able to do something that is glorious. So I wanted to give a big shout out to the Maynard family. And if you are in Florida, meet with me and meet with us over at the Maynard's parcel this Easter. My family, we're actually driving down straight to Florida for no other purpose other than to celebrate Easter with the Maynards and with the other families. It's not even a promotion. I'm not going to be doing videos or anything like that. It's just going to be dressed down TJ down there to go celebrate Easter. Little G Ranch is going to be sold out very, very soon. Every remaining parcel is going to be either under contract or is already under contract. So that's absolutely incredible. The next focus over there on Little G is to get Axe Homes on there. And we'll talk more about how we're setting that up. Now, let's talk about the other states. And I'm sorry, guys, I have to call out the Montana folks, okay? Montana folks, I hear a lot of chirping, a lot of chirping. We have so many different people with the land stake reservation over in Montana. I don't see enough angels. I find other states with smaller numbers of people with more angels than what I find over in Montana. Remember, every $1 in is $2 out as an axe angel, and good Montana properties do not come cheap. Typically, we need to raise between $300,000 to $500,000 per property to get things set up, and we are not at that mark for Montana. The same logic applies to every other state. If you're watching this update and the first thing that comes out of your mouth or that you type in is, but what about this state? That's the problem right there. Okay, that is the problem right there. We need angels to step up in states for us to go to those states. If we do not have angels, then we are not going to be prepared when negotiations happen. If we do like a property, and we will be left empty-handed in those situations. We need angels to be there so that when we have visited the property and we have started the negotiation, we can move forward. If we schedule a property, let's say we identify a property, like we actually already have, for example, identified properties in Montana, right? That we already like. If we go and we schedule a visit on those properties and we don't have angels aligned, what happens? Well, now the sellers of those properties do not take us seriously because we go out, we visit the property, and they expect an answer back typically within 1 week, maybe 2 weeks, on whether or not we're moving forward with that given property. So if we don't have angels aligned, then now we're waiting 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. The seller hasn't gotten an answer. Now they can't take us seriously. This is why we align angels in a state before we continue on with the visits for that state. Now, here's the cool thing. Angels are allowed to find out what we are looking into. I've learned my lesson to not preview properties to everybody before we have it under contract or before we have everything already negotiated. The only people who are able to find out what we're looking at are people who have soft committed as angels. In fact, we invite you out there with us to go vet properties. I want to give a shout out to California Joe Kramer, as a model for everybody else, every other state that isn't available yet, on exactly what to do. All right. Now, Joe is an angel and he's been able to help us out. His brother's also been able to help us out. But it's not like Joe is balling out with cash over here. Okay. He was resourceful. And what did he do? He gathered together local families. He got them up to speed on actually centralized real estate without me having to be there. And he ensured that every single family was a worthwhile angel family. They were a player that was ready to go. In fact, he told me that he had gathered no less than, he gathered more than 6 different families. And when I showed up, it was like 10 different families, all there together, all of them able to be angels for $200,000 or more, all of them already having watched the FAQs, all of them ready to go. When he told me that, at first he was saying, hey, let's have a Zoom call. I told him, you know what? That's so special. I will fly out there. And that's exactly what I did. I flew out there and I visited the property with these prospective angels. That's exactly what I will do with you in your state. So whether we're talking about Montana or we're talking about North Carolina or we're talking about Hawaii or Virginia, heck, it could be international. It doesn't really matter. Look at Joe's example for exactly what to do if you want to move forward faster in your state. You need to gather together friends and family and put together groups. That is one of the fastest ways for me to go out there to get a property started. So now let's talk about the Ranch Hand League. And I'm very, very excited about this because we have some breakthroughs in our grazing operations. Justin, Our 8th generation ranching director and his wife Stephanie, our director of dairy operations, recently took the time to educate themselves in a 3-day grazing intensive course. So look at Justin's example here. He's an 8th generation farmer. His daughter recently won a contest for raising the best heifer in essentially the entire area. He could lay claim to knowing it all. And yet what did he do? He went and educated himself even further on something that he could otherwise say, oh, I already know that. He took it intensive, and while doing it, he had a realization that radically shifted his thinking, and these breakthroughs will allow us to have more grass grown, rotate animals faster, and double, if not triple, milk production per acre, which is a huge implication for food output and profitability. Let me explain to you what I'm talking about here. All right, so the typical rancher just leaves open parcels for free ranging. That means that they leave cows out there to just roam around wherever they want. The next iteration for what we wanted to do at Axe was we had the idea, hey, we can use rotational grazing systems, but the idea was to do the rotational grazing within each parcel. So you would put a cattle herd on one parcel, and then you would just rotate it from one day to the next day, to the next day, to the next day, to the next day. After 10 days, they would go back to the first one. Then we considered doing the same thing, but amongst parcels. So it still is rotational grazing, but it would be from parcel to parcel to parcel, and it would extend things out in time. So instead of doing it once every single day, it would be every single week. But since they had a large amount of land, it was a little bit like the free range and the within parcel type situation. The big realization was how to move the cattle more efficiently for hyper-intensive grazing within each parcel and across parcels. So it's taking everything and really multiplying it because of what we have available at Axis Centralized Real Estate, since people's parcels are right next to each other. So in this system, you might move parcels from one to day 2, you move to the next little section, to the next little section, to the next little section, and you might move between 10 different little 1 acre sections on any one parcel. Then you move on to the next parcel, and you keep moving them day to day, if not even twice a day. And then on to the next parcel, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The point here is you can do this across parcels and go within each parcel and amongst each parcel, so that now you end up with parcel 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, all the way down to 80, making it 80 days before you go back to the very first parcel. This means that 80 days of growth has occurred on that first section on the first parcel, meaning that now the grasses are outrageously tall, outrageously nutritious, and again, you still have the benefits of rotational grazing. Ultimately, this lets each section of land rest, regrow, and regenerate naturally, boosting soil health and yield long-term without costing us even a single dollar. And it's not quite something that you're going to just find in a book somewhere, because again, nobody else really has the same opportunity. Like most ranchers, they're not living next to each other. But this innovation, it's so simple, but it is massive. Again, we're talking about a 10-day rest period versus an 80-day rest period, while still getting the benefits of hyper-intensive rotational grazing. It is next level. It's beyond even what Joel Salatin was talking about. Next little piece of news. This is once again thanks to Justin and Jeff Kennedy. We have sod collection in Florida. This is actually a screenshot from our agreement with American Resources Incorporated. They are harvesting sod over at Panoplia Ranch. If you don't know what sod is grass. It's literally grass that you can harvest and then you can place in. This grass is harvested and placed into other people's backyards as well as highways. What people pay money for their backyards and what people pay money for the highways is just naturally occurring there at Panoplia. So ARI has agreed to pay Axe $18 per pallet of sod, with each pallet containing about 400 square feet of sod. If you do out the math across an entire 10-acre parcel of land, then it translates to several $1,000s. So we've actually started collecting this sod, and we've already handed out paychecks to property owners. Shout out to the property owners over at Panoplia that have had it. We wanted to see exactly how the program went before we announced it publicly. We want to just try it out, see if we really like the guys. But so far, we've greatly enjoyed working with the gentleman from ARI. And a big reason why we did this isn't just because we were like, oh, great, it's a money opportunity. Actually, let's think through what our decision was with it. We were faced with the decision to reset everything so that we can grow things better over at Panoplia after we made the initial purchase. The initial idea was to perhaps do a controlled burn of the property, which is you burn the property and the natural ashes form a fertility layer for the next grasses. But doing so would be about 20, 30 grand out in costs. However, this allows us to bring in hundreds of thousands of dollars just with the grasses that are out there. So when we collect the grass, you're actually exposing the soil to the sun. This allows those soils to recuperate themselves, get more nutrients, and then when the sod grows back, because it does grow back, it takes a little bit of time. It takes about like 9 months, 12 months or so. When it grows back much stronger. So if you see some people out there and they're collecting sod, that's exactly why. Now let's talk about Wanted Raw Foods, because really cool fun fact, Wanted Raw Foods has now been around for about 6 months. So it's been 6 months since we first launched a product. We had the Wanted Raw Foods launch. That was a major success. We had over 120 people out there to the Wanted Raw Foods launch event. And the real benefit of it is the content creation and the meetings and the families that were had amongst the families that were there. It was just so beautiful. It was beyond, okay, great, we're selling food. It was great to meet people, to see people. I got to meet people's children for the first time. People were bringing in their family, and it was just a lot of fun. It was a truly memorable event. I would describe it a lot like a wedding celebration, but for land and for food. Let's look at the first 6 months of Wanted Raw Foods and exactly how we've been doing. So we brought in about $16,181.71 over the last 6 months. We were able to bring in about $1,500 and then $2,000 in those first initial campaigns. That was within the Axe forum. And then we wanted to focus on things publicly on Instagram. And I'm happy to report that, all right, it went from $1,000 to $2,000 on those first little campaigns to test things out. Then we reset things, and it went from $200 to $1,240 to $5,307 last month. And then this month, we're now at the 15th of the month. We're only halfway there. We've already had a record-breaking month with over $6,000 in sales. And if we continue the progress, it's going to be over $12,000 in sales. So we see that there is steady growth upwards. Let's talk about the things that have been working, all right? So direct calls to action in the headlines of posts, specifically with the dollar amount right then and there, as seen in the Feast of Kings ad, is fantastic. So we want to continue the direct-to-consumer ads that feature exactly what is going on in each individual deal. Again, featuring packaged deals is very appealing to people, more appealing than just individual items. And calling out offers through ManyChat is super beneficial because A, it's very easy for people to strike and take action, and B, it adds to the number of comments on that post, which therefore triggers the algorithm to increase the number of views. So you have a positive upwards spiral. Another thing that's been working a lot is in-person sales at the farmers market. We've been running tests by having Stephanie include Wanted Raw Foods products over at the Montgomery Farmers Market. For example, selling eggs over at the Montgomery Farmers Market. And we've been testing to see what pricing flexibility we have with corn-free, soy-free egg products. Now, here's the things that we're improving, and honestly, they're not bad. We're just improving it. I would say that we're still looking for that viral hit. Okay, for me, a viral video is something that's getting at least 100,000 views, but ideally 500,000 views or more. So far, a lot of our videos have been ranging between 4,000 to 10,000 views. I'm honestly not freaking out though. What you do when you're trying to get a viral hit is you're just looking for the right format, right? There's a way to deliver information to people in the right format that once you know that right format, you can actually start repeating virality again and again and again. So all we have to do really is just continue changing formats until we find the thing that people really strike at. It's truly just volume, it's repetition, and it's grit. The other thing I've done is I've had the whole team start pitching in by appearing on videos, so it's not just me. So you're going to see more videos that are coming out from Justin. You're going to see more videos that are coming out from Adam. And on my end, what I'm going to be doing is, now that I also have hired Malcolm, my new marketing apprentice, I've been sending Malcolm out on little secret missions. He goes out and he goes and films with Justin, with Adam, with Stephanie, on his own. I'm not even there to direct them. They actually do it on their own, which is amazing. I mean, 6 months ago, that would have been crazy for entire videos to be scripted, filmed, and edited and uploaded without my involvement whatsoever. So that's a huge sign of growth. On my end, watch for the TJ Visio Day account to start posting more stuff. Essentially, I'm not trying to sound conceited here, but essentially I have to become an Instagram influencer, right? So having my personal page give out tips and give out relatable advice, different things like that, that leads back to Wanted. That is a very strong strategy. And now that I have Malcolm, who can work with Justin, Adam, and Stephanie, we can make it so that the Wanted page continues to have those guys for that page, and then I can have an influencer page that then naturally and subtly gets people to go over to Wanted Raw Foods. In addition to that, that's what can allow for market differentiation by offering courses and information that nobody else can. Another thing I wanted to show you guys is Wanted Raw Foods Montgomery. This is the actual location that we're choosing. Look at this wide open field. This wide open field allows us to create our own farmers market-like environment. Now, one of the reasons I chose this location is because it's right outside of Wilder Love Coffee and Meadow to Market. And I know that when people go to the Montgomery Farmers Market, they're always stopping by Wilder Love and Meadow to Market. We also see that this building is anointed. It literally says Jesus loves you on the side. And a e-commerce brand, a Christian e-commerce brand, has ran out of this building and run for the last several years and done incredibly well. So you get a little bit of a preview of the spaces that are inside there here. Now let's talk about Axe Homes and Construction. And to do that, I want to talk about what we're aiming to do here and why we felt the need to create Axe Homes and Construction. Because if you can recall in the FAQs, I used to say, hey, look, we're just a land development company. We don't actually build your homes. And for the longest time, I resisted being involved in the home build process because I thought, you know what, let me just focus on one thing at a time. Let's just get the land development piece. So what would occur is I would put third-party construction partners, but in Texas and in Florida, we saw that those construction partners simply do not understand what we're doing, and they were creating unnecessary delays and creating jumbles in communication. So this first started over in Little G in Texas, but then I noticed the same exact patterns happening over in Florida. So if you notice, actually, I'm taking off the Build Partners tab for those areas as well as every other area because of the fact that so much confusion was there. So what did I do instead, and what have we been doing? What I've been working on? Well, what I've been working on is I put on my little John D. Rockefeller hat. And if you know anything about John D. Rockefeller, he was really good at acquiring stuff. And I just went out and acquired every single piece necessary to be part of the vertical, to provide the best home design and home construction experience on the market, period. The first acquisition, the first piece was getting an incredible COO. So by the way, if you're building your own business, just take some of these tips. The first thing you need is you need the general of your army. You need a COO. An amazing COO will be a complement to whatever you are. They're the yin to your yang. In every single one of the companies, I've chosen COOs to run those companies. So I have Carrie for Access Centralized Real Estate. I have Jeremy for Visude LLC. I have Adam for Wanted Raw Foods. I have Justin for the Ranch Hand League, and I have James as a COO for Axe Homes and Construction. James goes and forms partnerships for me. He's involved in sales conversations. He's involved in operations and standard operating procedures, and he does all that. He does all of those hard thinking things for me. So again, if you're running your business, find someone who's very competent that you can use their already existing expertise. We then acquired A&E Modular, formed a partnership with Whisper Creek, and have found a selection of curated designs after a series of different deals and partnerships that we've been up to. So let's talk a little bit about James. As I said, he's the Axe Homes COO. He's done over $1.5 billion in multifamily unit construction, as well as another $53 million in cradle-to-grave home construction in the Hollywood Hills region. So James oversees construction development, including partnerships and venture opportunities, and he ensures that everything gets there on site, on time, so you can have the smoothest assembly process possible. A&E Modular is a company that we've been talking to for several months. Actually, now it's pretty crazy. It's going on almost a year, and in just a few months will be almost a year, I think at the end of this quarter. The real thing that A&E Modular brings to the table is their ability to put crews together. So Greg within A&E Modular, for example, has over 40 years of experience in construction, and what he specializes in is putting crews together. So whenever there would be an emergency situation, he would be called out to that area. So let's say it was New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. He would be called out to that area to put together emergency crews to start rebuilding people's homes. And so he would go from area to area to area, emergency after emergency after emergency, putting together the crews in those areas. That translates now to every single one of the Axe properties. Greg is very good at putting together the crews necessary for our properties in remote areas. And we've situated things so that now we can have on-site crews that focus only on Axe home builds. This means that now those crews don't have to be leaving and coming back with all the materials and with all of their equipment. They're able to focus in on just one job. In addition to that, that means that the crew management and the oversight is much easier because you don't have to be traveling around to different locations. Everything is right there. The next partnership that we formed is with Whisper Creek. Whisper Creek gets designs pre-cut, numbered, and shipped to your individual parcels. And this saves a ton of time, and it makes it a much easier experience for you. I would compare it this way. Imagine that you had just something as simple as a Lego set. What most people are doing with their home builds is the equivalent of trying to look at a box that has a nice little Lego design on there, and they're going out and individually buying the raw materials for that Lego set and then trying to cut and put those Lego pieces together on site. That is what leads to confusion. That's what leads to chaos, and that's why a lot of projects don't finish in a timely manner. By working with Whisper Creek Homes, what we instead do is we have pre-selected designs sent into them. They pre-cut every single piece necessary for that home build. They number every single piece and then they ship it to us in a nice little package that goes directly to each individual parcel. And now that it's at each individual parcel, all it is a matter of assembling the pieces that have already been pre-cut and already been numbered. And you literally just follow the numbers. It's idiot proof. Anybody can be able to do it. Ultimately, here's how the Axe home build system works. First off, we want to help you take advantage of bulk deals by creating cohorts of families across states. So what we found as a sweet spot, and we're still working on this, is every 5 families or so, we want to place an order together in bulk. In doing so, we can lock in materials at much better pricing. So here are the 6 steps to be part of each individual cohort. And again, a cohort can have houses from little G and Florida. It doesn't matter because we can ship out all those materials to those states. But what is important is to lock in and be part of each individual cohort. So for example, right now, we've got about 4 different families that are together. We're looking for that 5th one for this next cohort. So if you're interested in it, please message me, James, or Drew. Message Drew to get to be part of this next cohort. So there are 6 steps in our home design system, and it's this. You design your parcel layout so that you know where you're going to even put a house on your individual piece of land. You get pre-approved for a loan. You choose your home design. You get those materials pre-cut. You have the materials delivered to your parcel and assembled, and then we put on the interior and exterior finishes. Let's talk about designing your parcel layout. The number one problem people face when building out their parcel is blindness. They have no ability to visualize the layout for their parcel, so they make unwise decisions. I see it every single day. Somebody comes up to me, I just can't see. I don't know. Where am I going to put stuff? I have no idea. It's okay. You're not expected to have any idea. However, we do not want to proceed forward in blindness and make unwise decisions. When you talk to Connor, our go-to landscape architect from Ecclesia Designs, he will talk to you about your plans into the future. He'll talk to you about the style of life that you would like to create for yourself, and he will help you reverse engineer that lifestyle and those plans for yourself. Because even if you only plan to build 1 home now and you plan to build 20 homes in the future, you need to mindfully lay out that first home now so that when you are ready to build those 20 other homes in the future, you have the appropriate space for those other homes. So this is what it looks like when you work with Connor. This is a real parcel. I'm not going to name the name of this person who owns this parcel, but suffice it to say, Connor worked with them to figure out a layout for what their home design could look like. And you can see that they have a beautiful, wide open, fenced pasture for themselves that they're going to use as part of franchising. You can see cutouts right over here at the end. This is what allows us to move the cows in and out of that parcel right over here, as well as right over here and up top over here. We see that there is space and location for a pond over here. And Connor was able to mindfully use the contours of the land in order to create a layout that makes having the family compound very easy. We can see the main home over here, sport courts over here, a gun range over here, a nice terraced food forest over here. And then we have areas for Airbnbs that are far out of the way and cannot be viewed by the people who are living here in the main home. I don't really expect anybody to come up with something like this on their own, but in working with Connor, that's how you create a parcel layout like this. And then you can figure out later what the individual home designs are, but now you at least know the layout for the whole thing. Let's talk about getting financing. This is going to be extra important because you're going to need financing regardless of whether you're doing your home build or not, if you're going to be financing your land parcel as well. So there are 5 things that you need to know when getting financing, right? And the key to it all is to know that the banks are really just looking at two main factors. If you can understand that it's as if there's a legal argument that needs to prove these two factors, then you'll know everything you need to know about financing. All right, so when banks look at you, they need to know, number one, how likely you are to pay off your mortgage, and number two, how much value is in the asset they're lending on if they have to repossess that asset to recoup their losses. So again, they need to know, are you worth your money? Are you going to pay us back? And if you don't pay us back, then how am I going to get my money back? In other words, is this actually a valuable house? So when you're presenting an argument for funding your loans, there are going to be 5 things you have to gather. It's going to be 2 years of tax returns, 2 bank statements, proof of gainful employment, a 720 credit score or above, and a debt to income ratio of about 33%. And by the way, you can submit these things with multiple people and multiple families. So let's look at these last 2 points, a 720 credit score and a debt to income ratio of 33%. The 720 credit score is because that is how you secure the best possible down payments for yourself. Technically speaking, it could go down to as low as 680, but the lower your credit score is, the higher the down payment that you're going to have to provide. And unfortunately, the same people who have a 680 credit score are typically the same people who cannot afford a higher down payment. That's why I just tell people, have a 720 credit score. If you need help on getting a 720 credit score, here's 3 things you can do. Number 1, you can lower your credit card utilization rate. That's typically what it is. You're using your credit card balances too high. Knock it down so that your credit cards are between 5 to 10%. So let's say you have a $10,000 balance on your credit card, or that's the amount that you could have on your credit card, then you have to knock it down to between $500 to $1,000. Number 2, you need to remove credit checks on your report. Just go through, call the banks and get those removed. You could also send in letters to get them removed. And number 3, one of the biggest things that you could do is you can get added as an authorized user on someone else's credit card. And if you get added as an authorized user on someone else's credit card, that can give you their credit history. So I actually one time went from a 540 credit score to above a 720 credit score simply by using that trick and using the credit score of one of my parents and using their credit history onto my credit history. Now, when it comes to a debt to income ratio of 33%, what that means is that if we look at your monthly income, the ratio between your monthly mortgage payment and your monthly income must be officially, according to the banks, less than 43%. Legally, they're not allowed to give you a loan if it's a ratio greater than 43%. So if you have a $10,000 per month income, then the debt to income ratio of 43% dictates that you cannot have a loan with a monthly payment of greater than $4,300, because $4,300 is 43% of $10,000. Now, realistically, most people have car payments and they have credit card payments. So those typically take up about 10% of a person's income. So a more realistic debt to income ratio goal is about 33%. And the nice thing about having that 33% is that it's very easy to multiply. Now you can just look at your income, figure out how much you make monthly, and then divide it by 3. And now you know how much you can afford to pay per month in your mortgage. So again, legally, they cannot offer a loan for greater than 43% debt to income ratio. You might ask, all right, in that example of someone making $10,000 per month, 43%, $4,300, how much is that over a 30-year term? That is qualifying for about a $900,000 loan. But again, they will consider car payments and credit card payments. So I tend to recommend considering a 33% debt to income ratio because that's more realistic and easier to calculate. So consider that if you're making $10,000 a month, 33% would be about $3,300. That means that you would pretty much qualify for about a $725,000 loan. Now, if we're talking about a construction loan, the cool thing is on the construction loan, when you're building out the home, let's say it's $725,000. You're not paying a monthly payment on $725,000 right off the bat. You're going to be making interest-only payments based on what are called draws or phases or little milestones on the project until your home finishes. And we'll go over what those milestones are. So, for example, you might have the first draw includes your parcel land and your initial deposit. So you got a $250,000 parcel and you're putting in your $50,000 initial deposit for Axe Homes. Well, then you'd be paying an interest payment on $300,000, not the full $725,000. Then you would have the next draw. The materials are cut and ordered. So now you're getting to the 50% mark and greater out of the total balance that you could have. So in this case, $550,000, you're paying interest-only payments on the $550,000. Then you might have the final draw, and that's going to be all $725,000 that you were approved for. Now that you've done that, now that you've closed, now you would begin to be paying the principal plus the interest on the mortgage for that loan. So I've created a chart, and I'm going to include the chart at the bottom of this update. This chart allows you to see the estimated loan that you could be approved for based off of your income and the monthly payment that would be required for that loan. So for example, if we're talking about $250,000, then typically it might be $50,000 down, and that would be a monthly payment about $1,200, which means you must be making at least $43,000 for that in order to qualify for that $250,000 loan. Now let's look at someone who wants something like a budget of $900,000, right? So $900,000, we can see what 20% down is. That might be $180,000. The monthly payment might be $4,300. Well, in order to afford that monthly payment of $4,300 at a 6% interest rate, then you would have to be making about $13,000 a month, which would put you about the top 20th percentile, or making it about $155,000 per year. So you can use this chart to figure out, hey, this is probably what a realistic budget is going to look like for me if we're going to proceed forward with Axe Homes. So again, how can we ensure that homes are built on time and on budget? We have to remember that bad planning is what leads to blown budgets and wasted time. Let's look at, for example, a change order. A change order is when you make a mistake and you try to change something out in the middle of construction. That occurs because of bad planning. So when you have a change order, not only did you pay for whatever materials that were there that were already wrong, you have to pay to remove what was already installed. Then you have to wait for new parts and you have to pay for labor. Then you have to pay for adding in those new parts. That means that whatever you were doing is now going to be 2 times the cost. And if you do that 2 or 3 times across one project, that can be the thing that pushes a person past their approved loan amount. And now that you're past the approved loan amount, now that's when construction becomes a huge struggle. And that's exactly what I've seen previously. That's what I want to prevent when creating Axe Homes and construction. We wanted to completely eliminate this nightmarish process by having crews that remain on site and only focus on our properties, as well as not starting until everything is present on site and on time. So let's now talk about the actual process of choosing a home design and how we've set things up to help you save 90 to 99% on architectural fees. See, a custom built home with custom architecture can take about 6 to 9 months just to be able to create that architecture, and tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. I know that for me, for my own personal architectural build, it's about $150,000. So for my 4-unit family compound, just the architecture alone, $150,000. I know a lot of you guys, and I know that that would blow your budget out of the water. Now it's worthwhile having something like this, because everything is built out from the layout to the rooms, to the kitchens, to the doorknobs. Every single thing in my home design has been well thought of. I have a hibachi kitchen. I've got a wellness suite. I've got unbelievable things. But the key for a person who wants to save money on that is to use pre-selected and pre-made designs. And so I've actually had I've done two things for you guys. Number one, you can use my own design. So even though I paid $150,000 for my design, you do not have to pay $150,000 to use the design that I've started for my own Axe home build. But in addition to that, we've also found an entire library of other builds that you can pick and choose from. No, they're not fully custom, but you don't have the budget for fully custom. Fully custom is $150,000. That doesn't make sense for someone who's on a $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 budget. But these builds that we found, you can change around the roof line, you can change around the colors, you can change around so many different factors that the chances of someone else having the exact same build as you are essentially statistically impossible. You can't really have the same two designs when you look at all the different options that do exist. So fully custom, no, but ticky-tacky, literal track homes, everything looks exactly the same. It's not that either. Ultimately, this saves time, money, and effort because the majority of work has already been done by the time you choose one of these designs. So let's look at a few of them. Here, this is the Hazelwood from Advanced House Plans. This is a wonderful design. This one is the Ridge View. Here's another design, and here's another design. I know a lot of people were asking for a barn dominion style. From Whisper Creek, they have designs as well. They can customize the exterior. So this, for example, is a log home, but you're not stuck just having log homes. You can take something that looks like this or that looks like this, and you can change around the exterior if you want to make it more modern. And same thing with the other designs. If you think the other ones, like these ones, oh, this is too modern, that's not that big of a deal. You can change around the exteriors. The big deal is that we have a floor plan waiting for you and it's already engineered. We already have the prices all figured out so that you are 90 to 99% further than where I was at when I was doing my custom architecture. So we just wanted to do that for you guys to make life simpler. So, okay, so how do we streamline the home build process? We can streamline the home build process through pre-cutting and pre-assembly. That means literally cutting, numbering, and pre-assembling sections of your home before they even arrive on your parcel. Once they do arrive on your parcel, it's a matter of connecting the pieces according to their number. So here's a timeline of what it looks like. And this is a very real timeline of exactly what the steps look like. So let's pay attention. All right. So you can have your first draw to secure your design, secure engineering, and to schedule production. At this first draw, it's going to take about 2 or 3 weeks to select the design and make sure that it is engineered correctly. After that point, the next step in the process is to have the second draw on your loan. So again, you got pre-approved. Let's say, for example, you got pre-approved for $750,000. Great. Move number one, as soon as you sign, there will be the first draw of $50,000. This allows us to make sure the designs are vetted and engineered and that the schedule is set into production. This starts that production. Then, after those 2 or 3 weeks, we'll have the next draw of the next 50% of the balance within that loan. So in this case, it was $750,000. We already put in $50,000. That leaves $700,000 left over. Well, we're going to get it to that midpoint of $375,000. That allows us to make sure that the production starts, all of your materials are sourced, all of the framing, all of the timber, all of the steel. You can do everything I'm talking about with steel as well. All of that gets cut out for you. And we also order the finishes and exteriors because we are going to be skating where the hockey puck is going and making sure that as your framing materials are getting cut out, the finishes and exteriors are also getting shipped to your parcel so that at the end of this 6 to 8 weeks, everything is delivered and on time at the same time. So once we are essentially at the midpoint of this process, as you get closer to everything being cut out, You then have the next draw of money. So this draw will take you from 50% of the balance to now 90% of the balance. So you have another 40% that'll go in. That 40% must be paid out for the deliveries, for the materials to be delivered. That's not even my policy. That's how it is with Whisper Creek, and that's how it is with the steel company. That's how it is just in general. You need those materials paid for, and then they will make sure, boom, that they're on your individual parcel of land. At this point, everything gets assembled, and we put in the interior and exterior finishes. This process, when done right, takes as little as 6 to 8 weeks. And that's when you get to the point where you can now close on your property and move in once it has been inspected. So now you've closed and you even started moving into your house. 30 days after the closing, there's a final home inspection. You closed, and that is when the final draw comes in, taking the balance to the full 100% of the loan that you were approved for. That is how you build out a home. So with that being the case, thank you so much for joining me here today for this April 2025 update for Axis Centralized Real Estate. What are your next steps? Your next steps are to continue being here in the forum, get your pre-approvals if you're going to be a saint in one of our upcoming properties, and finally, to gather other angels if you're waiting for us to come to your state. If you do those things, then you will be successful. Thank you so much.